One thing that often gets overlooked here in Canadian politics is committee hearings. These things can turn into a bloodbath in an instant, and that's what we're going to be taking a look at today. Welcome back to another video, everybody. This is going to be a great one. You're going to want to sit back, relax, and enjoy the show, as well as you're going to want to make sure that you're subscribed and you got post notifications on, so it adds a layer of insurance so you can actually be notified of upcoming videos, and smash that like button if you haven't yet already. As well as a friendly reminder, if you want to offset some home heating costs, since chances are you're not on oil heating, so you're going to have to pay the carbon tax. So if you want to lower that thermometer and maybe add on an extra layer, you can find some awesome hoodies down in the description below, or likely the pinned comment of this video. And without further ado, let's get into this video.
Turning to the trade agreement itself, can you tell me which section in the Canada-EU Free Trade Agreement has a mention of carbon pricing or a carbon tax?
Well, let me begin on your comments around my opening remarks. I think to suggest that the government of Canada took advantage of Ukraine when exactly the opposite was done was something that I should put on record and
Ukraine
clarify.
took advantage of Canada?
When a member calls this legislation woke, I would like to suggest, what would woke mean? Is it because there are progressive elements in it that protect the environment, that provide opportunities for small and medium-sized businesses, that for the very first time has a chapter for Indigenous trade opportunities? And to your question around the EU Free Trade Agreement, we're so proud of CETA because of its standards.
Proportional time for question and response. So what section in CETA has a carbon tax or a carbon price?
CETA has provisions that protect the environment.
It does not have anything in there on a carbon tax or a carbon price. CPTPP, what section of CPTPP talks about a carbon tax or a carbon price?
I respect those questions, but I thought I was here talking about Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement.
If you don't know the answer to the question, you can just say that, Minister. What section of CPTPP has a carbon price or a carbon tax in it?
What I would say is that in those agreements, CPTPP and in CETA, there are strong provisions to protect the environment, and it's in fact those very provisions where you are seeing reports from the chief economist where exports by Canadian exporters, particularly around environmental goods, have actually increased. So there are good benefits for Canadian businesses.
But there's no actual section that mentions a carbon price or a carbon tax in either of those agreements. Is that correct?
Both of those agreements have strong environmental provisions, and we're really proud about that.
If you can't answer the question, that's fine. What about in CUSMA? What section in CUSMA has a carbon tax or a carbon price in it? You can just tell us the section. If you don't know, you can say, I don't know, rather than talking about other aspects of that agreement.
Well, I like to talk about the other aspects of the agreement because they actually are really good for Canadian businesses, and they put us on the strength of being able to build towards economies that are going to increasingly fight climate change, but
no
also create opportunities.
No one's disputing the value
businesses.
of trade agreements. I'm asking you what sections in those trade agreements include a carbon price or a carbon tax. If you don't know the answer, which you seem to not, I will tell you none of them have that in those trade agreements. Absolutely zero. So why would you include in a trade agreement at a country in the middle of a war a carbon tax? How can that possibly help Ukraine? You talked about aiding Vladimir Putin. Putting a carbon tax into a trade agreement absolutely aids Vladimir Putin.
Well, let me share with you.
These people are so
dumb. That the energy sector is really important to the Canadian economy. And in fact, it was on the signing of this, the completion of this agreement by the two leaders of the country, that that AECON group here in Canada, along with Ukraine Hydro Energo, signed a cooperation agreement to develop a partnership agreement on the construction of hydroelectric power plants in Ukraine. It's agreements like this, it's an agreement like this that actually enables companies to do exactly that around providing energy security and to work with Ukraine as they are rebuilding so that they are not only fighting climate change, but they are actually dealing with energy security in the country.
That's interesting. You didn't answer my question, which is fine, but that's interesting on energy security. You've got absolutely nothing in this trade agreement on energy security, do you? There's no chapter on it. but there's a chapter that puts in a carbon tax. Am I correct there?
This agreement is a terrific agreement because it provides the conditions for businesses to be a part of that rebuild effort in Ukraine. And you saw.
These people have no idea what they're talking about. They're told, okay, here's our policies. We're going to be issuing these carbon taxes, and it's up to you to figure out why, or maybe here's your script. It doesn't make any sense. No Canadian in their right mind is for this carbon tax. For that reason, and potentially that reason alone, the Liberals will never get elected. They will not get reelected, and there's a chance that they've ruined their reputation so much through their own stupidity that they won't get reelected for like 20 years or something. It's caused so much damage, generational damage. You have people that are coming out of school, getting into the workforce, that are not going to be able to afford a house for like 20 years. Rent is absurd. You have older people that they just can't afford to rent anymore. Everybody in some capacity is hurting financially, and it's because of our government. It's not because of the war in Ukraine. It's not because of this, that, and the other. It's because our government is so freaking stupid and incompetent. And I'd love to know if you agree or disagree with that statement that I just made.
Saw that with the this really important Canadian company that builds all around the world, and certainly to do a hydroelectric power plant in Ukraine, I think is something quite remarkable. So I congratulate that company.
Where's the section in the agreement that talks about electric capacity generation or natural gas development? Ukraine has some of the largest natural gas deposits in Europe. You talk about confronting Vladimir Putin. The best way to do that is to take away his energy money that he gets. Where's the section to develop the LNG resources for Ukraine in this agreement?
I think that the agreement in itself that actually provides greater certainty and
I think and I feel
services, which are engineering services that will actually come from the ancillary work that comes for those companies to to be in that space.
So there's no section on that. So effectively in Canada, you and the Prime Minister are pausing the carbon tax on certain parts of Canadians, while at the same time imposing a carbon tax in a trade agreement on a country in the middle of the war. I think your priorities on this trade agreement are absolutely wrong.
Thanks.
Minister, do you consider CO2 pollution?
Yes.
Yes?
Sorry, what is the question? Is air pollution?
No, the question is, do you consider CO2 emissions to be pollution? Do you not know?
I don't know.
Okay. You don't know. That's interesting. So you put in in this trade agreement, Article 13.3, sub 3, that those who pollute the environment should bear the cost of that pollution. But you don't know what constitutes pollution? Are CO2 emissions pollution in your mind under this trade agreement?
What I think is really
carbon emissions that you guys talk about all the time, is that pollution?
What's in this agreement?
Dude, she can't even answer, man. She can't even freaking answer. You have people that are writing bills and laws that affect all of Canadians and free trade agreements, and they don't even know what the fuck they're doing. They don't even know. They got their fingers so far up their own ass, they're using it to talk. It's insane, man. That's why these committee hearings are so valuable. Oh my God, this is hilarious.
Are some of the highest environmental standards, which the Ukrainians and Canada agree to, because we both agree that fighting climate change is good, and that as they're going to rebuild their economy and as they're going to rebuild their industries, as they're going to rebuild.
You can just see the wheels turning.
What they are able to do
and the steam coming out of her ears because her brain's working too hard.
So that's what's here. And I'm really proud that the officials here in Canada, but also in Ukraine, negotiated the highest environmental standards in a trade agreement that we've had.
I'm not going to let you talk out the clock on things not related to the question. You put in a section in this trade agreement that says that people who pollute the environment should bear the cost of that pollution. You and your colleagues always say that carbon emissions are a pollutant. That's why you've got a carbon tax in Canada. So you're reinforcing the Canadian carbon tax in a trade agreement with a country at war. And I'll explain why this is such a problem. 50% of Ukrainian electricity generation has been destroyed by the war, and you're suggesting that Ukrainians who use carbon, 60% of their electricity is from coal and gas, and you're suggesting that's pollution and they should pay for the pollution. If you want to support Ukraine, why would you put something like that in a trade agreement as they're going to struggle through a winter?
I think that's your reading of how this trade agreement is going to work. The intention and in fact what happened at the negotiating table is to negotiate an agreement that actually has high standards. And you know why that's important? Because if I look at the investments that have come into Canada for electricity generation, for battery production, it's precisely because Canada has a competitive regime that puts a price on pollution. And if you look at that internationally, that's actually creating confidence among investors, global investors. And I think Ukraine wants to attract global investors. And I think that they want to fight climate change.
You want to impose a carbon tax on Ukraine through trade. So it's interesting. So are you aware that Ukraine has difficulty importing natural gas due to the financial strains of the war? They actually have trouble getting it when winter's coming. Where's the agreement? Where's the section in this agreement to help develop Ukraine's natural gas? And because you probably don't know this, because you seem to not have been able to answer any of my question, Ukraine has the second largest natural gas deposits in all of Europe. So rather than putting in a section to say we're going to use Canadian expertise, we're very good at this, to help develop Ukrainian natural gas, so that would also, they could export it, defund Putin's war machine, which is critical. Instead of doing that, you put in a section saying that the Ukrainian person heating their home with coal-fired electricity or LNG electricity is a polluter. That's your priority?
Our priority is to stand with Ukraine. Our priority is to create an agreement.
Oh, this is so embarrassing.
Canadian businesses to invest. Our priority is to meet the aspirations of Canadian companies who wish to export. Our
doesn't need aspirations. They need to develop their LNG. That's what they need. It's not in this agreement. Why not?
This agreement provides the conditions to actually enable that to happen, sir.
I must say, I'm extremely disappointed and essentially insulted that during your opening remarks you chose to open up with criticism of my colleagues and I on this side, members of Her Majesty's loyal opposition, for asking questions with regards to this trade agreement. And somehow you said, and this was astounding, that we're somehow advancing Putin's agenda by asking questions with regards to a free trade agreement. I just wanted to bring some, factual information forward. I mean, it must be remembered, it was a conservative government in 1991 when Canada became the first Western country to recognize Ukraine's independence from the Soviet Union. And it was a previous conservative government led by Stephen Harper that Canada undertook Operation Unifier, to bolster Canadian military training of our armed forces of the Ukraine. And it was the same conservative government that the original CUFTA was negotiated between Canada and the Ukraine. So, Minister, again, somehow your comments were not only extremely disappointing, but on the verge of insulting. I mean, you claim in your comments that somehow we're looking to delay second reading debate on this, yet your government failed to call it forward for almost 2 weeks. And I see C-57 is not even on the House agenda for this week. So again, that is rather disappointing when you question us, and this government controls its legislative agenda, not members of Her Majesty's loyal opposition. Minister, in the briefing note that was provided by staff, it says Global Affairs Canada in their March 2023 initial environmental assessment, it concluded that modernization is unlikely to result in significant negative environmental impacts. Yet, within this agreement on Chapter 13, it talks about carbon pricing, a carbon tax, and measures to mitigate carbon leakage. I just wanted to ask, are those type of provisions included in CUSMA, CETA, and the CPTPP agreements that currently exist?
Well, let me thank the member from Niagara Falls for this question, and you know, because you are right near the Canada-U.S. border, you understand and you're very familiar with how important trade agreements are, and of course, it is the work of all of us as parliamentarians to be able to ask questions, and I think that you misunderstood when you say that I was critical because of you asking questions about this free trade agreement. Actually, to the contrary, I think it's the appropriate work of parliamentarians like yourself in this committee to be doing that. But what I would say, I mean, around delays, is that we've seen on 2 occasions when this bill was before the House, and Conservatives moved concurrence debates instead of talking about C-57. So I hope that we can
Madam Chair,
rely on you
Chair, Minister,
to support this bill. And as I said in my opening remarks,
the wheels are turning.
We can meet the moment that's before us, and I think that we all can and should support Ukraine.
Madam Minister, again, your government controls the legislative agenda. And for a 2-week period, C-57 somehow was not a priority. Somehow this week, it is not a priority. My rights as a parliamentarian to discuss it at second reading, to debate it at second reading. I have yet to have that right. And yet we're here building out what Mr. Canning says. We are undertaking, there seemed to have been a rush to get here for this pre-study. And yet we have not even allowed our analysts the time. We've been provided a briefing note the day before this meeting on a 700-page agreement, over 700 pages. And that briefing note was 2 pages. So, again, to Mr. Canning's point, I think we're doing a disservice not only to our analysts, but to all parliamentarians, so that we can provide the needed input so that we get to the best agreement that benefits not only Canada, but Ukraine. And again, talking about some of the comments earlier from my colleague, 60% of Ukrainian energy is coal and gas, and nuclear is a huge aspect and leadership position for Canada, as well as natural gas. How come there's no discussion of energy security within this agreement? Energy cooperation and energy security.
Yeah. Mr. Baldinelli, the time, Minister, you have, try and answer that quickly. The time's off.
I'm so thrilled that this agreement has the highest environmental standards of all of the agreements that we have with our trading partners.
As you can see, these liberals are literally out to lunch. They don't even know what it is that they're pushing forward as motions and bills that have catastrophic repercussions around not only Canada, but the world. It's insanity at the highest level, and I'm here for it. And I think I'm going to start paying attention a little bit more to these committee hearings. And I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments. Was this entertaining? Was it informative? Looking forward to reading what you guys have to say down below. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to give a like and subscribe if you haven't yet already, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now. Thanks so much for making it to the end of the video. If you want to support the channel financially, you can do so by checking out the merch shop linked right up there. Or if you want to do something for free, which is also absolutely acceptable and highly encouraged, you can subscribe right there. If you want to continue watching videos like this, you can do so by clicking or tapping right there to watch the next upcoming video. And if you want to watch a little bit of different content, but also Canadian stuff, you can do so by clicking right up there. That's my second channel, House of Canada, also known as the House of Commons Highlights. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.